SEP Fanfic Readings presents Aurelian by BittyBlueEyes. Chapter 22. Insecurity. Hermione sat with her back against the arm of the sofa and pulled her legs up to her chest. She delicately held the stem of her wine glass between her fingers and gently tilted it in circles, watching the deep red liquid swirl inside. She sighed, took another sip, and allowed the side of her head to fall against the back of the couch. She glanced at her coffee table out of the corner of her eye. It was covered in parchment, newspapers, and books. She had been trying to get some work done that evening, but finally gave it up as a lost cause. She simply couldn't concentrate. There was a light knock on the front door, and Hermione's eyes moved in its direction, but she was unable to see it without lifting her head. "Come in," she said lazily. She heard the soft click of the door being magically unlocked just before it opened. Hermione lifted her head and smiled softly. "You know, in the future you might want to ask who it is before you tell them to come in," Harry smirked. "I knew it was you," Hermione said simply. "Do I have a unique knock or something?" Harry asked as he walked around the sofa and took a seat at the other end. "Well, I would probably be able to guess by that, but I knew you'd come," she answered. "You said she would." "Wine?" Harry asked curiously, looking at her glass. "Yeah, would you like some?" Hermione offered. "No, I had some at dinner, actually," he said slowly. "But I don't think I've ever seen you drink wine except for special occasions." "Well, that's normally the only time I drink, but it seems to have become a regular thing now," she replied. Harry frowned. "How much have you had?" "Relax, Harry. This is my first," Hermione responded, with a lopsided smile. "I just needed a little help relaxing." "Why? What happened?" he asked with concern. "Nothing." "It's not nothing. What happened? Is it that girl? Did you go to the police station today?" he pressed. "No. I mean, yes, I went to the police station, but no, that's not what we were looking for. The poor girl was robbed and stabbed to death," Hermione answered sadly. "Then what is it?" Harry asked. "Nothing. It's just everything," Hermione replied, staring into her wine glass. Hermione glanced up at him and saw that he was waiting for her to continue. "It's just, during the day, I busy myself with tasks. It's a puzzle, just a case that we're working on, and I can keep myself together for most of it. But when evening comes and it gets quiet, it just all presses in." "Then talk about it," Harry urged. "I don't know what there is to talk about," Hermione said honestly. "It just is what it is." "What is?" Hermione sighed. "Everything. I—" Her insides twisted and she finally let all that she had been holding in just fall out. "My life has just been flipped upside down. A couple weeks ago, everything seemed so simple. Now, we're trying to bring down a nefarious witch who returned from death. I have visions of real memories where I watched my friends die. I have a 2-year-old son. My relationship with my mom is strained. My father won't speak to me. I'm seeing Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy, who was the father of my son, who I just met. And now Narcissa Malfoy knows about it. I mean, he did tell her, didn't he?" She wasn't sure if she wanted him to confirm or deny that. She knew that she'd be upset either way. She did not know Narcissa, but she didn't feel comfortable with the woman knowing about her and Draco, let alone knowing about Aurelian. But at the same time, she would feel hurt if he could not admit those things to his mother. Harry nodded. "So how did it go?" she asked nervously. "Just as planned, really," Harry replied. "She didn't seem surprised to see me, but she didn't look happy to see me either. Still, she wasn't unkind. She really didn't say anything. Dinner was uncomfortable. No one said anything. It was silent from the time we sat until the meal ended. It's really not anything to discuss over dinner, and Malfoy and I couldn't think of anything to say. When we finished dinner, we went to the drawing room. Malfoy apologized to her for worrying her, and told her that there really wasn't anything comforting that he could say. He told her that he had been working with me for a couple of weeks on a confidential case, and that, though it's still confidential, we felt that she needed to know what's going on. He went right into explaining after that." "What did he say?" asked Hermione. "Well, he told her that we received a warning of a future war, and that we were looking into it. He mentioned the memories, but not what was in them. Then he came straight out and told her that it's Bellatrix, and that we just discovered that she had returned from death. She looked shocked and horrified, but the look vanished as quickly as it came. It seems that Malfoy's stoic facade comes as much from his mother as it does from his father. She said nothing, asked nothing. Still, I saw it. She's frightened," Harry said seriously, feeling somewhat guilty as he remembered her expression. "Did he tell her about Aurelian?" Hermione wondered aloud, noticing that Harry hadn't said anything about him. Yeah, he answered. When he mentioned him in the beginning, he just told her that he was your son from the future. When he finished explaining about the memories and Bellatrix's return, he didn't tell her about the Horcrux. He came straight out and said that Aurelian was his son. And? Hermione prompted, her heart pounding in her chest. And it was one of the only times she spoke. She said that she thought Malfoy said that the boy was your child. He told her Aurelian is yours and his. She said, I see. It got rather uncomfortable, so that's when I said something. I told her that we were working our best on it. I told her that her and Malfoy's safety was really important to us, and that we will do whatever we have to keep them safe. I told her that I could put up some wards over the property right then, if she'd like, but I told her that you were the most skilled person I know when it comes to spatial wards, knowing just about everything except Fidelius charms, and that you could come by tomorrow to ward their home. Actually, I'm working on the Fidelius charm, Hermione informed him. But what did she say? She thanked me for my concern and said that she would consider it. Consider it? Hermione cried incredulously. What is there to consider? I don't know, Harry shrugged. Consider it, Hermione repeated in outrage. I can't believe that. What is there to consider? We're talking about setting up protection. Is she really so prideful that she would risk her son's safety rather than accept help from either of us? Draco is one of the first targets. He needs to be protected. I can't just— Calm down, Harry urged. I talked to him when he saw me out. He said that he's going to give his mother a little time to consider everything. But if she doesn't come to him about it by tomorrow evening, he's going to ask you to come over and put up the wards. He is the head of the house, but he still wants to respect her. Good, Hermione said fiercely. You really care about him, don't you? Harry asked softly. I just don't want to see him get hurt, she replied vehemently. I know, neither do I, but you didn't answer my question. Hermione looked flustered and a bit sheepish as she averted her eyes. Yes. I'm not going to protest you seeing him, but I have to admit that I'm kind of worried, he told her seriously. Things are going a lot faster than I thought they would with you two. I just want you to be careful. It's like you told me, he's not the guy from the memory. I know I said that, but I'm really not sure anymore, Hermione admitted. I've seen a lot of him lately. You haven't seen him like I have, and even you have said that he's changed. He's far from the boy he was in school. I know that he's changed, but neither of us really know who he is, Harry reminded her. He's still an angry person. He's searching just like the rest of us. I know, and I'm not saying he's a bad person. I just don't want to see you get hurt, he said earnestly. I know, but if I get hurt, it will be my own fault for moving so fast and opening my heart the way I am, she said with a grimace. Okay, now I'm really worried, Harry said, looking a bit angry. What happened, Hermione? Nothing. You're afraid he'll hurt you. What has he done? He demanded. Nothing, Harry, really, she insisted. This is all really new to me. I've never been in a relationship before. I mean, I've dated a few times, but it never got even to second dates. I'm just worried. Especially— She let her sentence die, sighed, and took another sip of wine. Especially what? Hermione shook her head. No, tell me. It's nothing. I'm being melodramatic, she chuckled mirthlessly at the realization. Relationships are difficult. Harry's tone was one to encourage her to continue. Hermione looked up at him rather apprehensively, and he sighed. I know I'm not Ginny. I don't claim to have any answers, but I can listen. You don't even like him, she said cautiously. I don't dislike him so much anymore, and I do care about you. Hermione worried her bottom lip. I just don't know what I've gotten into. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what he expects, and I'm worried about his mother. Narcissa? Harry asked in surprise. Well, yes. Draco hadn't admitted to seeing me when he talked to his mother, but he's going to have to soon. I know she doesn't like me. I don't know how much she dislikes me, but I know she certainly doesn't think I'm good enough for her son. You heard her response when Draco admitted that Aurelian was both his and mine. She hadn't said anything about her sister returning from death, but she was upset when she learned of Aurelian. Narcissa Malfoy doesn't like many people, Harry said flatly. There are only a select few that she would consider good enough for her son. Don't concern yourself with her opinion of you. I can't help it. It worries me, Hermione replied miserably. I'm not concerned about her so much as how Draco will respond to her opinion. In the memories, his mother wasn't there when we got into a relationship. She had been— she'd been killed. It's not that I wish that on her, she hurriedly added. but she wasn't in the equation. I guess that I'm worried about how she and the world around us will influence his opinion of me. We're going to prevent this war. You know we will. We'll be living in a different world than we were in the memory. What if he talks to his mother or his friends and decides that I'm not good enough? Then you'll know he's not worth your time, Harry stated. If he or anyone else believes you're not good enough, especially because they let others influence them, then he's not worth your time. I know, she said with a frown, but that won't make it hurt any less. I do like him. I don't want things to end so soon. One step at a time, Hermione. I know. You're going to have to stop worrying, you know. I'm not saying to trust him, but you can't really be happy with him if you're worried all the time, Harry told her. I know, she repeated. Just see what happens. Be careful, but just enjoy what you've got, he suggested with a shrug. And if he hurts you in any way, shape, or form, you've got me and every one of the Weasleys to make his life a living hell. Hermione snorted and chuckled and then laughed even more when she saw that Harry was absolutely serious. Okay, thank you, Harry, she smiled warmly. So, on to other things. Did you check out Pottages with Draco today? Yeah, Harry answered, immensely relieved by the change of subject. The shopkeeper in Hogsmeade said that they sold one just a few weeks ago. We asked for a specific date, and he said he wasn't sure, but he knows he can find it in his records because he remembered having a special repair that same day. We asked if he remembered the person who bought it. He said that he didn't recognize them straight off, but they felt familiar. He said that he would think on it, and if he remembered anything, he'll let us know. That's great, Hermione replied. If it was only a few weeks ago like the shopkeeper believes, then she hasn't had much time to put any plans into action. I hope we can find a date. Even more, I hope he remembers the buyer. Me too, Harry agreed. What about the goblins? Have you heard any more from them? Yes, and they agreed. If I get Crubat's case moved up, they'll give me the information. The only setback now is that they don't trust wizards. They said that they already have the information set aside and will keep it up to date, but they won't hand it over until they see my side fulfilled. Meaning? Hermione asked. Well, I told them that I don't have any influence over the outcome, but I'd see that it was made a priority. They said they understand that, but they're waiting to see movement on the ministry's part. I talked to Wayne. He said that he's already pushing it for me. As soon as he fills out the paperwork, a date for a dispute summons will be sent to both the witch and Crubat. I think as soon as Crubat receives the owl with the court date, he'll consider my end fulfilled. Wayne said that should only be another day or two. That's great, she said brightly. And you can't blame them for not trusting wizards. Yeah, I know, but I still wish they could. It would move things along so much faster, Harry grumbled. Well, that's really all I came here for. I'll talk to you tomorrow, I guess. Thank you for coming, Harry. I would have worried the whole night otherwise, Hermione said with sincere gratitude. I know. No more worrying now, though. Good night. Harry took a pinch of flue powder and disappeared with a whoosh inside the green flames. The next day, Hermione sat alone on her sofa once more, bent over uncomfortably as she intently studied the pad of notes she had just written. Quite suddenly, she ripped the top sheet of paper away from the rest, crumpled it up in frustration, and threw it into the fire. She tossed the notepad onto the armchair next to her and returned her attention to the ancient-looking treatise on the center of the coffee table. She gripped her hair in her fingers and she stared at the text. She had never before studied anything so complex, and it was frustrating, to say the least. It was written mainly in Latin, but much of it was still in ancient runes. There was even a bit of arithmancy involved, just for good measure, she decided. At first glance, she had thought that it looked impossible to figure out. After 2 hours of intense study, she believed it even more. Though she was quite skilled in translation and arithmancy, the page before her just looked like a jumbled mess of Roman letters, both Eastern and Western Arabic numerals, and runic and deviant symbols. Hermione sat up straight, took a long, cleansing breath, and forced herself to relax. After taking a second to collect herself, she attacked the mess in front of her from a new angle. She was determined to decipher the text and master the Fidelius charm, if it was the last thing she ever did. She gently shifted the ancient text to the side and pulled the photocopied sheets towards her. Arming herself with a tri-sided highlighter, she got back to work, now coloring each set by language. She had just gotten to the second line when there was a knock on her front door. "Just a second," she said, still pulling the pink tip of the highlighter across a long Latin piece of text. As soon as she got to the end of it, she dropped the triangular-shaped marking tool and whipped out her wand. With a quick swish and jab, she moved photographs frozen and Aurelian's magical toys tucked themselves away in the toy box. Hermione was still quite distracted when she opened the door, and gasped when she saw the blond man standing there. As soon as she saw him, a smile broke over her face. "Draco!" "Hi," he said. "I'm sorry to just come by like this, but I really didn't want to wait for an owl. I thought about the flu also, but I wanted to give you the chance to ignore me." "What?" Hermione asked, surprised by his candid admission. "Why do you think I'd want to ignore you?" "No specific reason. Sometimes people just don't want to be bothered, and it should be their right to choose to ignore the world," he stated simply. "Yeah, I guess, but I wouldn't turn you away. Come in," she invited with a warm smile. Their eyes met, and Hermione felt the flutter of butterflies in her stomach. A sudden urge to kiss him came over her, but she became nervous when she noticed the slight anxiety in his demeanor. He returned her warm smile and entered. "Where's Aurelian?" he asked as he surveyed the quiet apartment. "Oh," she said. Her heart dropped when she thought that he might have only come to see Aurelian. She realized that Draco hadn't really spent much time with him in the last few days, but she selfishly wished that he had come for her. "He's sleeping. I'm sorry. I only just put him down for a nap a little bit ago. If I'd known you'd be coming to see him, I'd have—" "No," he interrupted. "I mean, it's not that I wouldn't like to see him, but I came because I was hoping that I could talk with you." "Oh, of course. Have a seat," she offered casually as her stomach twisted into an anxious knot. It was the very thing she had just been hoping for, but the way he said it made her increasingly nervous. How was it that everything he did and said so profoundly affected her emotions? Draco nodded and took a seat on the sofa. Hermione followed and sat down next to him. "So, what's going on?" she asked. "Well, you know that I had invited Potter over last night so we could speak to my mother. And we did," he stated. "I know," Hermione answered. "Harry came over last night and told me about it." Draco looked up at her suddenly, and she saw a flash of jealousy in his eyes that took her by surprise. "I'm sorry. I should have come over myself. I would have, but I thought my mother might want to talk to me more privately when Potter left." "No, it's okay. I understand," Hermione assured him. "But did she?" "Did she what?" Draco asked in confusion. Hermione tried to hide her smile. She couldn't help but feel flattered by his adorably distracted state due to his unnecessary jealousy. "Did she talk to you after Harry left?" she clarified. "Yes. She took a little time to herself before she called for me. She didn't say much. She's rather disconcerted by the news. He sighed. She's scared." Hermione nodded. Anyone would be frightened by the news of Bellatrix's return, but it had to be especially difficult for Narcissa. Hermione felt sorry for Draco. She could see that he truly cared about his mother, and that it hurt him to see her scared. "Did she discuss putting wards around the property?" "No, not yet," he answered, still lost in thought. "She called for me again today, just a little bit ago. As I thought she would, she asked about Aurelian." "What?" Hermione said, taken by surprise. "She wants to see him," Draco told her. He looked into her eyes, trying to judge her reaction. She looked startled and worried, which was exactly what she felt. I, I, er... She didn't know what to say. She didn't even know what she should feel about it. I don't want to be distrusting, but, Draco, I really don't know your mother. Though I do trust you, I really don't think I would be comfortable allowing you to take him there when I—" "No," he interrupted, "you misunderstand. I wouldn't expect you to just hand him over to me and my mother. You're both invited." "By your mother?" Hermione asked uncertainly. "Yes." Hermione looked at him skeptically, and he felt forced to elaborate. "She just learned that she has a grandson and wishes to meet him. Even she does not expect you to turn him over to the company of a stranger," he explained. Hermione nodded, satisfied by this response. "When?" "Tonight, for dinner, if that works for you." Hermione nodded, hardly able to breathe for her intense apprehension. "Does she know that we're seeing each other?" "I don't like to keep things from my mother," he replied by way of answer. Hermione nodded again. She thought for a moment before hesitantly asking, "What does she think of me?" Draco looked caught off guard by the question. "She doesn't know you," he answered uncomfortably. Hermione was irked by his evasive answer. It was a difficult thing for her to ask. "I know that, but, well, your mother doesn't really like people of my parentage." "My mother doesn't hate Muggle-borns," Draco answered fiercely, incensed by the feeling that his mother's character was being called into question. As soon as he reacted, he remembered who he was speaking to and calmed himself. He knew that Hermione was not trying to insult his mother. He had told her before that she didn't have to worry all the time about offending him, but when she tried to carefully address her concern, and he had become angry. She was apprehensive about seeing his mother, and now she looked even more disquieted. Draco looked at her apologetically and continued slowly, choosing his words carefully. My mother does not dislike Muggleborns. She she sees them as a necessary part of society, but he struggled for words, not knowing the best way to describe what he wanted to say. There was no nice way to put it. She considers Muggleborns beneath her, us, me. It was the way she was raised. She does not have any problems doing business with them. She just doesn't associate on a personal level, Hermione offered gently when she saw him struggling. He looked up at her when she said it, only realizing then that he had been avoiding her gaze. His eyes looked sad, frustrated, and desperate. He needed her to understand, and the tender tone of her voice and soft but hesitant look in her eyes told him that she was trying. Yes, but that doesn't mean that she has a problem with me associating with them. If I had a Muggle-born friend, she would not protest, he told her. A Muggle-born friend? As in just one? Hermione asked, trying to feel out his example as it felt cryptic in its evasiveness. Draco looked even more uncomfortable. He had not thought of it in that way, but thinking on it now, this was probably true. His mother might be able to accept it if he had only one Muggle-born friend, but if all of his friends, the majority, or even just more than one of his friends was a Muggle-born, his mother would probably show concern. I'm sure that she probably prefers that I mainly associate with pureblood or half-blood wizards. You said friend, though. Your mother would not protest a Muggle-born friend. What about someone more significant than just a friend? Hermione diffidently inquired. Her insides ached with tension. Draco sighed. You have to understand. My mother has had a vision of what she wanted my life to be since before I was born. She thought it was all lost, everything, when the Dark Lord Voldemort returned. When I was pardoned for my crimes, my mother felt like she could have hope again. The one thing she had always hoped for most was a pure-blooded wife for me. She has been trying to encourage me in that direction for some time now. He could not look at her as he said it. So, the idea of me, she thinks... He was lost for words again. I'm not good enough, she dejectedly supplied. I didn't say that, he shouted indignantly. I know, but that's what she thinks, isn't it? She thinks that I'm not good enough for you. Hermione smiled sadly. Because she doesn't know any better, Draco said fiercely in his mother's defense. He was incredibly frustrated. He didn't want Hermione to get the wrong idea about his mother. This was all making her sound like a questionable person. At the same time, he didn't want Hermione to ever believe that she wasn't good enough. I don't know why you're so concerned about her opinion anyway. It doesn't matter. If she or anyone else can't see you for who you are because of what you are, then they aren't worth your time. Though he strongly believed it, it still hurt a little to say that he knew that he was one of those people not long ago. But she's your mother, Hermione said quietly. I said anyone, Draco said firmly, staring her straight in the eye. Why do you care what she thinks at all? She's nothing to you. I only care because she means a lot to you, Hermione answered, staring deep into his slate-gray eyes. Draco was dumbstruck by the answer. He stared at her in disbelief, as the conversation finally became clear to him. You're only concerned about what her opinion means to me? She means a lot to you. I see that. So her opinion is her own. She can think what she wants. It has no bearing on my own feelings. I can and will choose for myself, and she knows that, Draco proclaimed fervently. Is that what all of this is about? Hermione looked sheepish as she nodded, but she was too relieved to care. I don't care what anyone else thinks, he vehemently declared. I have enough to think about without concerning myself with others' opinions. It's taken me how many years to see you properly? You think I'm going to let my mother's preconceived ideas change things for me? I was concerned, yes, Hermione admitted quietly. Don't, replied Draco firmly. Hermione's eyes shined and her chest rose and fell with the quick breaths that accompanied her immense relief. Draco scowled, only then seeing how overwhelming her concern had been. He was upset that he hadn't seen it sooner, that she'd felt it at all. He reached out and gently pulled his fingers down one of the rogue curls framing her face. Hermione pushed herself onto her knees, cupped her hand around the back of Draco's neck, and pulled him into a slow, ardent kiss. Draco responded with equal passion. His lips were pressed firmly against hers and coaxed her mouth open. Her tongue danced with it between their open mouths, and a deep-throated moan escaped her when his hands came to rest on her hips. A light-headed feeling overwhelmed her, and she allowed her body to fall back onto the sofa, guided by Draco's strong arms. He pulled back and looked down on her in wonderment. You were worried that I was going to quit you, he realized. She stared up at him, breathing heavily, and nodded timidly. Her admission and the innocence in her eyes stirred a fire inside of him, and he buried his head in the crook of her neck, placing zealous but tender kisses on her soft skin, causing her to gasp and pant. "Get over it, Granger," he whispered softly in her ear. "You're mine." She moaned in the pleasure and whispered his name. She gasped and said his name a little more fervently. "Draco, too fast," she panted. Draco stopped immediately, but couldn't bring himself to move. His heated breaths chilled the moist skin that his kisses had left behind and sent a shiver down her spine. Draco breathed slowly as he collected himself. "I'm sorry," he said as he pushed himself back into a sitting position. His apology was sincere. She was right that he'd moved too fast. His kisses and words had been so impassioned, and he was afraid of what it would mean for them. Their relationship seemed so fragile. Never had he wanted anything more than to make their relationship work, but he was afraid that his intense dedication to her would frighten her away. "No," Hermione breathed, dismissing his apology with a shake of her head. She scooted back into a sitting position and stole one last kiss. Just too fast." Draco nodded and gently touched her cheek. She smiled warmly with beautiful flushed cheeks. "So, what time is dinner?"